On YouTube, and we are live. There we go.
Okay, is everybody here, Robert, that's supposed to be here, as far as you can see?
I can only see the 4. I have 19 people as you click on that arrow.
I don't see them either. I pulled down on the left-hand corner of the screen with the profiles or the thumbnails, and I got a few more people that I can view, but not everybody, I'm sure.
Let me announce who we have on here. We have Kathy Puglisi, Rosemary Moranti, Amy Roberts, Alicia Adorado. Let me go down a little further. Chris Farrell, Chris Wazorko.
I have the list. You want me to keep reading? We have Dave Lewandowski, Dave Underwood, Foster White, Jacob Rocco, Jeff Wallowitz, Lily Corniel, Lori Consalvo, Matthew Daskell, Rebecca Martinez, Rob Buden, Stacy Buden, Vicky Trzynski, Cindy Perini, Deb Hardy, and Steve Bussell, and Kevin Ross.
I know that Deb Tompkins was not going to be able to make it this evening. You all set? You okay with that?
Yes, yeah, everyone had the time, so they can still jump in if they need to.
Okay, Kathy, if you want to open up the meeting, we'll just.
Sure. Just a quick question. Is Joe Catanzaro logged in? Kevin?
I don't see him.
You don't see him? All right. Well, it is after 6, so we're going to begin, and if he logs in, he can just join us as we move along. I will open up this special work session of the Board of Education and the Town Council. The purpose of the meeting is to review the preliminary budget for fiscal year 23 with the Board of Education and the Town Council. Presenting will be Town Manager Robert Lee and Superintendent of Board of Education. So, Robert, I'm not sure who's going to be opening, but if you're going to be starting, why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we'll carry along.
Good evening. My name is Robert Lee. I'm the town manager for the town of Plainville. With me this evening on my left, maybe on your right, I'm not sure, but is Steve Lepage, who's the superintendent of schools. We're going to do a little bit of tag teaming as far as a presentation this evening. We are very early in the budget process, of fiscal year 23. We call it fiscal year 23 because the date that year ends is June 30th, 2023. So we begin July 1st, 22 and end on June 30th, 2023. We have up on the screen this evening a copy, or at least a view, of the budget agenda. We'll start with some review of the fiscal year 22 budget, a little bit of budget history, where we stand with the current year's expenditures, current year revenues. We're going to have some preliminary budget discussions, both on the town side and the Board of Education. We'll have some discussion about the unassigned fund balance. We'll talk about a little bit about the capital improvement plan, at least a preliminary budget estimate, and talk about a fiscal year preliminary budget summary, including a little bit of discussion about the revaluation that just got completed. So, and then at the end, we'll talk about some key budget dates. So with that in mind, I anticipate that this will go half hour, 40 minutes. And if there's any council or Board of Education members who have any questions, I would ask that, if you can save it to the end, I think that would be smoother. But if somebody has something that they really need clarified right away, just let us know somehow, and we'll try to help you out. All right. Okay. With that in mind, the mill rate change as a result in the current year's budget was a slight decrease. It was a slight decrease of 0.06 mils, or 0.18%. And that was approved by the council back in May of, I believe it was May of last year. The total budget for the town, the current budget, is $63,456,000. That was an increase of 957,000 plus from the previous year, or a 1.53% increase. We generally deal with four major elements of the budget: general government, Board of Education, debt service, and capital projects. What this shows is that 1.53% that you saw on the previous slide, and the $957,000 that you saw on the previous slide, the increases in general government made up 581,000 of that. The Board of Education was $682,000, and we actually had a decrease with the amount contributed from the general fund to capital projects of $306,000. So that's how we came to the 1.53% increase to the current year's budget. That's fiscal year 22. A little bit of our 10-year history from fiscal year 12 to fiscal year 21. It looks like 9, but if you count fiscal year 12, it's actually 10 years. The general government budget has increased an average of about $420,000 each year, or an average percentage increase of 2.51%. The Board of Education budget has increased an average of $714,000 a year, or an average increase over that 10-year period of 2%. If you take into account debt service and capital projects, the total budget has increased just north of $1 million a year, which is an average of 1.83% average per year. Right below that, you'll see that the 10-year inflation rate average during that period of time was 1.73%. What that means is that the total budget increase on an average was just slightly higher than the inflation rate, which I think is a pretty good indication of really conservative budgeting, at least as far as the expenditure increases are concerned, relative to the inflation rate, which drives up our costs to begin with. I would like to point out a couple of concerns, and that is the inflation rate now. The inflation rate, and I only had the first 11 months of the year. December wasn't out when this number was done. But for year 2021, and that impacts our budget going forward in 23, certainly, the inflation rate for the first 11 months was 4.49%. But even more important, or as critical, is the last 5 months of year 21, and not necessarily including December, was at 5.75%, meaning the inflation rate seems to be increasing and not staying at that steady, and it's significantly higher than what we've seen in certainly in the last 10 years with that average inflation rate of 1.73%, and that's certainly going to have an impact on next year's budget. Speaking of the fiscal year 22 budget, which is the current fiscal year, we expect debt service to come in, under the budgeted amount by about $1 million. And that was planned for by the town council, because that $1 million will be transferred to the self-insurance fund to make up a deficit that accumulated when we had the self-insurance plan as far as the town is concerned. And we've talked about that at several town council meetings. And we just wanted to show that we are going to have a surplus in debt service, but that money is going to pay down a deficit in the self-insurance fund. We anticipate, based upon where we are halfway through the year, that police overtime will exceed the $550,000 budget by about $150,000. It's kind of typical of what we've seen. We've seen a little bit higher than that. We've seen a little bit lower than that, but we're right now projecting about $150,000 over our current year's budget. There's many reasons for that. Some of it is as people retire or leave us, it takes 8, 9, 10 months to replace people who are not certified, because they have to go through a training process. And so we have a lot of gaps as far as that's concerned in terms of overtime to fill in some of those times. Risk insurance, we expect, is going to be over budget this year by about $30,000. That has to do primarily with cyber insurance, which has become a bigger issue. Data processing maintenance, ClearGov budget. Council may recall that we're putting everything under a new software format, and that's going to exceed what we anticipated by $25,000. I'm not sure how much of it was budgeted ahead of time. And the fire overtime, which has to do, I believe, primarily with our fire marshal. We expect that to go over about $18,000. A lot of that has to do with COVID and the work that he's been doing as emergency operations person, and miscellaneous. And with all of the other line items in the town and Board of Education budget, we're expecting to come under budget by about $300,000 overall. If you take all of the individual line items, a little bit here, a little bit there, it does add up. We're including the Board of Education. So when you total that all up, we're expecting that based on our budget of $63 million that you saw in the first slide, we're expecting that we will come in under budget by about $77,000. On the revenue side, a little better than on the expenditure side. Back taxes, we expect to have a surplus in back taxes, more revenue than what was budgeted. Right now, we're projecting about $200,000 more than the $525,000 that we had budgeted for back taxes. A lot of that has to do with the large check that we received, large payment that we received on the October 24 parcels that were located up on Pinnacle. Motor vehicle supplement, MVS, that stands for motor vehicle supplement. There's higher motor vehicle values. Not only are used cars retaining their value, they're actually increasing their value in many instances. So we're anticipating that motor vehicle supplement, which went out in January, is going to exceed what we had anticipated by $150,000. We've had a lot of property transfers with people moving in, people moving out, and people refinancing. It's actually sale of property. We've had some large sales as well. We're expecting that we'll have a surplus of about $50,000 or above what we had budgeted. Miscellaneous state grants, and then interest on investments. Interest rates are very low, so we're not anticipating it's going to save us any significant dollars. We probably would make very minimal as far as that's concerned. So we're seeing that overall on the current fiscal year we're in right now, that we will exceed our revenues by about $382,500 from what we anticipated. If you add to that the anticipated surplus on the expenditure side, we're talking about, an increase of about $460,000 finishing out the year in the positive. Now I'd like to turn it over to Steve Lepage to do his presentation. I know he's biting at the bit. He loves doing these presentations. So without further ado, Steve, I'm turning the fake microphone over to you.
Thank you. Despite how it may seem, I don't love these presentations, and I get nervous because I want to make sure I get everything right for the town of Plainville and for our students. So, but I'm excited to start the process. So we started in the summer preparing our budget, and as many know from our budget calendar on the Board of Education side, we start our budget workshops tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the high school, and we have 2 meetings next Tuesday and Thursday night as well. So looking forward to really digging into the line item accounts tomorrow night. I want to thank Sam Alderstein, our Director of Business and Operations for the district. He spent pretty much the entire winter break and beyond that until now. And we spent a lot of time working on the budget. Sam is outstanding at what he does, so I just want to thank him. And I'll jump right in. I want to thank our entire administrative team for picking up all the slack and doing everything else while we're engaged in budget development and presentations. So jumping right into COVID impact, and this will be an abbreviated presentation. It's only 11 slides, counting the cover slide. If you're wondering how long I'll go on tonight, we'll go into more depth with all the account and line items of our full budget starting tomorrow night. This is just a snapshot. Learning loss and COVID impact are concerns, and just our student enrollment has changed dramatically over the last couple of years due to COVID. Last year when we came back, we had 112 students who had disenrolled for a number of reasons. Some relocated, some homeschooled, a number of reasons. And we had 476 students choosing to remain remote for most or all of the year. So that really changed our makeup of our schools. The largest percentage for most students were at the high school, followed by the middle school, and then the lowest were at the elementary schools. However, with all that came learning loss and challenges, and a real need to bolster our services, support staff in order to remediate. So we've been doing a lot of that work this year, the best that we could. However, we expected a little bit more of a normal year than we've had. We did gain 527 students, if you can see in that last bar. This year, we gained 527 back. We're really at a level, pre-pandemic level, and even a little bit higher. We're up into 2,300 in the low 2,300s not that long ago as well. So we keep climbing. Even with the continuing challenges, we're addressing learning gaps, social and emotional needs of our kids, our staff, and working on the learning deficits and systematically and meaningfully teaching our kids and helping them to recover. This is just a snapshot you see every year with the per pupil expenditure. This is done for 166 Connecticut districts. This does not represent every district. They're basically a name for every 5 districts up there just because of the space, but you can see Plainville is to the right of the center, you know, at the top of the bottom third, if you will. We are lower than 60% of all districts when it comes to per pupil expenditure. The number did go up, and I just wanted to emphasize that based on our decline in enrollment due to COVID and within the various reasons I shared on the last slide, the per pupil expenditure seems much higher than it was. It was in the high 17,000s. So it's based on the total number of students divided by the budget. So it's just something to keep in mind, but that was relative to a lot of districts. We're still about the same. We're number 100 out of 166 districts, going from highest to lowest expenditures. This slide is one that we update every year. And I know Robert shared a 10-year slide. This is an 11-year average of the Board of Education budget history. There were some anomaly years back in 16, 17, and 17, 18 when the state reduced our budget mid-year when we had already approved a budget. We're operating with that budget. They reduced it midstream by $400,000 in total. Then we had the 6% increase of health insurance costs, which had a major hit, and that was the 5.13% year. But all in all, when you look at the averages, 1.82% over 11 years is the average. And if you took out the state cuts and the insurance anomaly years, it would be a 0.95% rate. I did want to emphasize that over the last 2 years, due to realized savings that we've been able to, through efficiencies and unfortunate COVID inability to operate all of our services over the last 2 years, we did return $1.768 million of Board of Education budgeted funds to the town due to COVID-related realized savings. So that was in 1920 and 2021. This next slide just kind of breaks that information down a little bit for you based on the different eight different line descriptions. So you can see the largest ones were in transportation in 1920 because we didn't have much transportation going, utilities, and I won't go into much detail here, but you can see the total adds up to $1.768 million. You know, we did the first year and last year in different amounts pre-fund the capital plan, which was able to help lower the overall tax situation for the town in partnership, you know, with the town council and town manager Lee. The cost savings stem from very undesirable situations, not something we want to happen. We budget the money that we need, and we want to be able to spend that to help kids learn and grow as they should be. So it's not something that it's a favorable tax outcome, but when it comes to the big picture, it's not what we want. So we're hoping that doesn't happen again. There may be some mild areas of savings, as Mr. Lee referenced, between the town and the, or modest, I should say, areas between the town and the board when you factor in all the line items. But we do have some, you know, we are back fully in person. We have been all year. We're running our activities and our programs and our sports and our clubs almost to the same level as we have in the past. So that, you know, again, there'll be potential, but we are fully operating. So the detailed forecast on the budget and any potential savings will come in the weeks and months ahead. This is our budget status as of this past December 31st, New Year's Eve. Sam was probably working on this at that time, knowing him. You can see those top 2 lines, salary and benefits really always account for 85% or thereabouts of the Board of Education budget. We are a heavily staff intensive operation, but you can see that to date, approximately 50% of the budget's been expended, tracking like a typical year. COVID-related expenditures have largely been grant funded. The biggest risk to date include 2 things: a $500,000 outplacement student for students with significant needs that we are not able to meet the needs of in district, more than our budgeted of $500,000 currently, and $150,000 overage in substitute teachers. really doing our best in whatever we can to fill the vacant positions that have resulted from a number of issues related to COVID and having to increase the substitute teacher pay in order to attract and retain those substitutes as well. So we project ending the year approximately or pretty close to our budget. Next slide is just the COVID impacts on the budget. So the Coronavirus Relief Fund, or CRF, and ESSER 1 COVID-19 recovery grants were all expended in the prior 2 years in order to meet the needs of kids when they were learning at home. Those first 3 months when we went fully remote and had to flip things within a few days and teach remotely to our kids, and then keeping as many kids as we could in school safely with our staff, safely with all the PPE and all the changes we had to make and modifications to our school and our programming and our remote teachers and everything else that was happening. So those are expended. We were allotted an additional COVID ESSER 2 and ARPA or ESSER 3 as they call it for us in education, but those grants, so we were awarded those, and we haven't received the ESSER 3, but we're expecting to. Strategic planning for recovery, for additional recovery and investment planning related to those grants is going to begin in coming weeks. We have a kickoff date webinar that will open up to the public. We're going to invite key individuals from all the schools. We're going to open to the public, the Board of Education, Town Council, to join us as we kick off additional strategic planning around use of funds and how we want to shape our district using those funds. The 4 main areas that we've been directed to use those funds in are listed at the bottom. State and federally funded COVID recovery dollars are really meant to address academic, community building and community relationship building and community involvement, student and staff well-being, and technology needs so that we can meet the needs of kids. And then just a couple more quick slides. You've seen this one every year. This really doesn't change very much, but we're fortunate in Plainville that the ECS formula does work in our favor. We're in the 4th year of a 10-year phase-in. You'll see that on the next slide. But the state pays for 28% of the educational costs in Plainville. The locally funded is 72%. You can see the dollar breakdown there. The amount of funding is based on a formula, the ECS formula, using several factors, including student count and the level of need within a community. On the next slide, you'll see this depicts the ECS funds and how much we have received over the last 4 years. Back in 2019 with $10,359,000 change, and as you can see, it's going up by about $200,000 per year. We are one of the districts phasing in. Some districts are phasing out and going to end up receiving little or no money at the end of those 10 years. So this does supplement and offset budget expenses. The only other thing to note on this slide is that the revenues are paid to the town, and all residents receive the benefit from that. And it's all factored into the entire budget, as you know. In 2021 and 22, we decided to change our tuition-free to a tuition-free preschool. Part of this was to help with the learning recovery and reading and remediation, getting students in school, socially acclimating, and we have a very robust preschool program thanks to Vicki Trzynski and her team. The tuition-free preschool students will be adding to the ECS reimbursement above. It is phased in over the 10 years as well, so it's not all at once, but I believe it's $4,500 per student for preschool. So we have about 110 thereabout students in preschool right now. So the tuition we were collecting of about $120,000, $100 to $120,000 that we're budgeting for each year will be far offset once it's fully funded. At $4,500 a student times 100 is $450,000. So it'll take time to get there, but our primary goal is to have those kids in school, not having to pay. It's a service to the community. It's good for kids. The studies have shown over time how valuable that is, and it's also going to be financially beneficial to the district over time. And this was a good time to do it with using some ESSER funds to offset that. And then I think this is just about my last slide. This just shows some of the contractual. As you know, we're 85% salary and benefits, and we have several collective bargaining groups, teachers, paraprofessionals and tutors, office professionals, custodians and maintainers. And we also have our nurses group, which is a small group, not a bargaining group, but we still bargain with them each year. And we have our administrators union. So this just shows the Some of these are known rates that we've already negotiated. We will be starting negotiations with teachers, but that won't go into effect till the 23-24 year. So this is the rate. It was a 3-year budget, a 3-year contract with the teachers. This is the 3rd year coming up. It's the highest year, 3.4%. The total for 3 years was 8.85%. I know Ms. Puglisi was involved in that with that negotiation process, along with a few of our board members at the time. So we'll be renegotiating with them. The office professionals and custodians, we put a placeholder in there. We don't know it's going to be 2%. It may be higher than that. I don't expect it would be lower than that, but time will tell through the negotiation process. Those are the only 2 that are going to be negotiated this year. Their contracts expire at the end of this school year. So we do have to negotiate with office professionals and custodians. They're both smaller groups. So the overall amount of a potential increase, we budgeted a placeholder of 2%, but the rest of them are already set and negotiated. So this shows you that the ultimate amount based on these figures are $1.393 million, which is a 3.5% budget increase just for the contractual obligated staffing contracts. So it's something that's important to know as we go into the process. And my last slide, just my budgeting commitments for myself and on behalf of the Board of Education. We'll continue to be thorough and thoughtful and mindful in our approach to budgeting. I don't know, Kevin, if you have that next slide. We'll request only what we believe essential to educate and support our students and our staff through the season of change. We'll continue to collaborate, communicate, innovate, remain mindful and resilient, our portrait of the graduate qualities in our budgeting practices as we model that for our kids and our staff and in all things. We'll do our very best for children, families, and our dedicated Plainville Community Schools team. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Did you take that picture? Do you take that picture recently, or is that a?
Mr. Johnson took that picture, I believe, this year, and it was in his high school slideshow. So I took it because I really liked it. It's a pretty picture. It's probably something like it's going to look tomorrow. So there'll be a 4:30 a.m. wake for me. All right, on the way.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was checking my slides, and one slide was out of place, so I'm going to scroll to it because it's more timely. But let me get to it first. You just heard a few minutes ago the contractual expenses that the Board of Education is facing going forward into fiscal year 23, or at least the school administration. And that, those are preliminary numbers. And, I'm sure they'll be modified somewhat over the next several months, but these are some of the things that the town is anticipating as well. We have contractual salaries somewhere between 2.5% to 3%, which would, add about $325,000 to the budget next year from the start. You see the same health insurance percentage increase that you saw in the Board of Education, at least we're anticipating at this time. I anticipate that this is going to be a conservative number to start and can only go in one direction, which is down. We hope that heads in that direction, but we were being advised to at least have a placeholder in there of 6%, which is about $110,000 impact to our budget if that number sticks. We have a defined pension plan for some town employees and the police department, less town employees, more police department. And based on what we receive from our actuaries, we would be that would impact the budget by $70,000. And then everybody knows the fuel costs that are going up. While some of our fuel usage is down, which is very helpful, the increase in the per gallon price both for gas and diesel is going up. So we're projecting right now the net impact to be somewhere around $36,000 for fiscal year 23. So you get an idea of what we know right now is somewhat driving our budget before we get even to the presentation stage. I'm going to go back a couple of slides here. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the unassigned fund balance. The unassigned fund balance coming into this year would, which would be fiscal year 21 is as of June 30th, 2021, stands at $12.2 million. That's unaudited at this point in time. We expect the audit to be completed shortly. But just a year before that, back in June of 2020, it was $10,351,000. That's an increase of about $1.86 million, and a good portion of that was because of monies returned by the education budget, but also we had revenues that came in a little bit higher than what was anticipated, and town expenditures came in a little bit under budget as well. So that all contributed to the increase in the unassigned fund balance going forward. We do have financial advisors who speak to us about what we should do, what we should keep in reserve as far as unassigned fund balance. Based upon that, last year the town council adopted a fund balance policy. That fund balance policy goal is to have a fund balance percentage against the entire budget somewhere between 12 and 14%. So that's the goal, is between 12 and 14% of the total budget. On the next slide, you see a little bit of the fact that that $12.2 million based on the current year's budget is actually higher than the 14% that's recommended by the financial advisors. It's actually at 19.5%. Some of that is a good portion of that percentage is a result of very positive results in the previous year. But the council, knowing this, has used some of that fund balance, not just keep accumulating it, but used it in various areas. And what you see here on this slide is that the council used $600,000 to offset the amount that would needed to be raised in the current year's budget. So that was a good part of the reason why we had a slight tax decrease. They took almost $870,000 and applied it to the capital improvement budget, and that's why when you saw the capital improvement line item go down by 300 and some odd thousand, a good portion of that was because of the amount that the council appropriated to the capital improvement budget. The council has made some additional appropriations in the current year's budget of $440,000 to support several items that were planned for. We expect that our fiscal year estimated revenue surplus, you saw that in an earlier slide, is $382,000. Our estimated expenditures, coming in under budget, $77,000. And the council is considering a workers' comp payout, may or may not occur, but we've plugged it into this number just to be conservative, of $199,000. So at this point in time, we're only halfway through the year. We're anticipating the unassigned fund balance to go from 12.2 to about $10.5 million. It's a decrease of about $1.65 million and would represent at the end of the year 16.65%, which does give us a little bit of wiggle room going into next year's budget as well to support things like the capital improvement budget and perhaps, some as far as the unassigned fund balance going towards tax relief as well. That's to be determined. Next is the capital improvement budget. I anticipate in working with and I thank the cooperation of the school administration, Steve Lepage and his team. We presented a budget. The budget request when it came to my desk was somewhere over north of $2 million in requests. In the end, I'm recommending a budget of $1.3 million, $1.33 million. Council has not yet seen the detail on this, but they will as far as the budget presentation in early March. $928,000 of that would be towards general government. $403,000 would be towards the Board of Education. And the sources of funding, the funding sources for the capital improvement budget, very little coming from the general fund, $7,800. That's what we were contributing in the current year. So no change in the current year. Can't go much lower than $7,800 to begin with, but we'll keep some dollars in there. We are anticipating surplus in the CIP of about $200,000. We have town aid road funding to help support the capital improvement budget of $300,000. We have some money in the debt management fund that could be used to offset the capital improvement budget, one-time revenues against one-time expenditures of $400,000. And I will also be recommending that we use the unassigned fund balance of $423,000, which would further lower the unassigned fund balance that we were anticipating at the end of this year, but that would be actually in next year. So to put that in perspective. So very little impact on the general fund budget towards capital improvement, but we do have some other sources of revenue that could be used. And I know that in going over it with Steve Lepage and his team, I believe that we've or at least I'm recommending the most important and the most significant and the higher priority line items in the Board of Education request.
Right. No, we had a good conversation about that, and I appreciate the cooperation. collaboration use of some grant funds to accommodate most of the capital budget requests, especially the most important ones.
We've talked about what we anticipate for expenditures for next year. You saw a couple of slides with regards to the Board of Education and the general government. This is some preliminary revenue estimates that we see for the next fiscal year. One is the grand list. Since we are in we're in a reval year, the grand list is actually going to go up significantly, and I have that on a future slide. But we have averaged a 1% increase over the last 3 years. The grand list has increased without revaluation by about 1%, and in fact, that generates new revenue just in and of itself. Is that as the grand list grows, we're able to derive more taxes based upon the current year's mill rate. So that's not based on next year's mill rate; it's based on the current year's mill rate. So I felt it was appropriate to at least show that had not been for reval, we would have expected that we would have had an increase of revenues of about $590,000. That's what that number represents. We talked a little bit about the educational cost sharing grant and the fact that it's being phased in over 10 years. It's somewhat frustrating to both Steve Lepage and myself of that 10-year phase in, because what the state has basically said is that we should be at the 10-year mark for revenues, and we're only at the 4th of the 10 years. So we would have liked to have gotten there all at once, because that would certainly soften the impact on the local taxpayers. But that's, those are the cards we've been dealt, and as a result, we expect that the educational cost sharing grant will go up about $192,000 next year. And the next item is AmeriCold. We put that in because it's kind of it's outside of what we would have normally expected as far as the as far as the grant list increase, so outside of the 1% that we had as an average. AmeriCold is not finished. It's about 40% complete right now. 40% means that we can partially tax them as far as the July 1st bill is concerned, and this is as of October 1st of 2021. And based on that 40% completion where they're at right now, that would generate an additional $331,000. I will tell you, when they're completely finished, which is expected to be done sometime in early 2023, that number would jump up to $850,000 in new taxes. So what we're anticipating right now is an increase in revenues before we even get into other revenues, and these are the ones we know, of about $1.1 million. As far as the preliminary expenditure increases, we just took last year's increases to both the general government and the Board of Education, and said, hey, even if there was no increase in those line items, that represents $1.26 million. So if we rolled the clock back and did it all over again for the current fiscal year, we, all other things being equal, we'd be pretty much of a wash as far as between new revenues and last year's expenditures. So it's not too bad of a start, in my opinion. As far as our that's the slide that I showed earlier that was out of place. So, so we'll skip that one, since we don't need to do it twice. At least I don't believe we do. This is our grand list, which was completed a couple of days ago, and this is from October 1st, 2020 to October 1st, 2021, and what we see here in the bottom right-hand corner is an increase in the grand list of about 14.9%. But there are three major categories that make up the grand list. That's real estate, personal property, and motor vehicle. And I think it's important to show that to break out those three categories. And basically what that's showing is that real estate prices have increased, an average, the grand list has increased approximately equal to the final total of 14.9% at 14.87%. Personal property, which mostly is equipment and manufacturing, for businesses and whatnot, has actually decreased somewhat. A lot of that is because there's depreciation involved. There wasn't a lot of new equipment that was bought to offset that. So as a result, we're seeing pretty much a flat change in terms of personal property. And again, you see the motor vehicles as well going up by 25%. That isn't all new cars. That's a lot of that has to do with the value of old cars that are actually more according to the Blue Book, according to sales, according to comparative sales, are now worth more than they were the year before. So what we're seeing is motor vehicle grand list increases, way above what we would normally expect to see. I will want to talk a little bit about the real estate as well. Real estate gets broken down as well between several major categories. One is residential, condominiums, commercial, industrial, and open space or land. I will tell you that relative to those particular categories, what we're seeing is that for homes, residential property, the increases are above the 14.8% on an average. Commercial and industrial somewhere around, they've increased, but certainly nowhere near what residential has, somewhere in the area of maybe 6 or 7%. So what we're going to see this year is all things being equal, even if the budget was in place, even if reval had happened last year, you were going to see a shift from even if the tax rate stayed the same, we're going to see a shift from commercial and industrial property to residential property. I will tell you that 5 years ago, we saw the opposite occur. Where commercial and industrial property increased significantly more than real estate, and the shift went from residential property towards commercial and industrial. So we're seeing a little bit of a flip-flop from what we saw 5 years ago. Of course, 10 years ago, we saw the same thing where the shift was from commercial and industrial to residential, and that's the the dilemma we face when we get into reval is the cards get reshuffled, and as a result, not everybody's change is the same, and it really depends on what the value of your home is based upon comparative sales. It's too early to predict what what the mill rate would be just on a based upon some of the other revenue factors. So I'm not going to try to put something up that I would normally do on a non-reval year. Finally, before we get into the schedule, I would like to thank my team as well. Rob Buden, who's the finance director, and Matt Daskell, who's the assistant town manager, and the rest of the team for assisting me in putting this together this evening, putting it on PowerPoint and getting it all teed up for presentation this evening. As far as our budget schedule is concerned, I plan to present to the town council a recommended budget on March 7th, which is a regular town council meeting. It's on a Monday. There'll be a public hearing on the town manager's proposed budget on March 10th, which is 3 days later. Then the council will have work sessions the following week, pretty much every day, and it may bleed into the following Monday or Tuesday, depending upon how easy or tough it is to get through all of the presentations. Part of that presentation will be the Board of Education attending a council meeting. All of those budget work sessions will be televised, and so people can either watch them, the following Thursday, and see how we make sausage as far as the budget is concerned. Sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it can put you to sleep, but in the end, I think it's a very good learning experience. We expect that there'll be a public hearing on the town council's recommended budget. After their budget work sessions, they will make a recommendation similar to what I did as a town manager, and that will be presented to a public hearing on either April 4th or April 5th. Will be a public hearing on the town council's recommended budget. Then they will meet and decide whether they're going to make any changes based upon the public hearing, and then the all-day vote will happen on April 26th, which is on a Tuesday. So that's our presentation for this evening. I don't know if there's any members of the town council or board of education that have any questions or comments that they would like to make, but I'm sure we would try to answer them for you.
Robert, so I'll start. I've already been approached by more than a few people regarding their letters of assessment changes, and and you are aware, of course, of the anxiety of some of those increases in the valuation of their property. I've continued to say it's a little early to try and give any answers regarding how that's going to impact their taxes. Is there any additional information you could have at this point? I know you did say it's still too early, but what can we tell people to try to calm the waters if we can?
Two things. One is reval company had informal discussions with anybody who received a letter and questioned their value. I think we had a little bit of, somewhere around 100 residents take advantage of that. A lot of people just wanted to, understand how the number was derived. Others came in and said that they felt that the number was a little higher than it should be. I will tell you that the reval company, in having those discussions, some information that was provided to the reval company, they reduced what, they did reduce about half of those requests as they related to people who provided additional information. So my recommendation would be that if people feel that their assessments are too high, I believe it's too late to have the informal discussion with the reval company, but I would recommend that people appeal their assessments to the Board of Assessment Appeals. So if there's any new information that people, there's still an opportunity for people to do that if they feel that for somehow the number that was given by the reval company somehow is higher than it should be. And people shouldn't come in and just say, I feel it's too high. They should come in with some, some information, maybe some comparative statistics or some information if they have you down for, for 3 bathrooms, you only have 1.5, certainly that impacts, those kinds of things. So I would recommend that people, look at their assessor's card and make sure that it's accurate, number one. Number two is that, there's some people that said, well, my assessment went up by 15%, so my taxes are going to go up by 15%. Well, we expect the grand list to go up by 15%. So if you're somewhere in that 15% range, the impact is you would expect to be somewhere maybe in a normal year, maybe a little bit higher than that, but it's not going to be a 15% increase in taxes. If you're in a 25% range, then, you're not going to see a 25% increase in your taxes. You're going to see something less than that. So, I would say just be patient. We will be providing information to taxpayers based upon what their particular tax impact will be, both either positive or negative. Shortly after the town manager, I'm going to try to have it available when the town manager's budget is presented so people can see, based on the budget, even if it's a no increase on the expenditure side, and I'm not saying it's going to be a no increase on the expenditure side, that there's, people are still going to see an impact, as far as the, because of revaluation. But we'll try to have that information out so maybe help to calm some of the nerves or apprehension with regards to what reval might mean to their particular circumstance.
Okay, and also regarding that, their option once they've contacted, or you said the deadline is passed for them to contact the company that did the reval. Is that right? Did you say that? Or
for the informal discussions, if there's some incorrect information though on the assessor's card, for example, they can come in and see the assessor, and she'll make a note of it and make sure that it gets changed during the BAA process. So if you see any factual errors, we can still find time to correct them. It's not a big battle if there's a factual error.
Okay. And so going forward, if a person chooses to go before the Assessment Appeals Board, what are the dates and deadlines for them to be able to do that? Do you have that information?
I don't have it offhand.
Okay.
I believe it's mid-February. We'll look that up. We'll try to get the answer before we get off if there's other questions. So
that would be great, just so people know if they haven't gone through that or they've missed that end time, there is still another opportunity if they feel that they need to follow through to go before the Assessment Appeals Board. So more information we have out there in a timely manner, probably the better it is for people. Yes,
I would say that early to mid-February is probably the last date. So but we'll get a specific date out and we'll post it as well.
That would be great if you could get it up on our website and however else you want to communicate that. That would be very helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Not sure if there's anybody else that wants to pipe in from the either council or the Board of Education. Just unmute yourself and. Okay.
Hey.
Not hearing anybody else, Kathy.
Well, that's because you both did an outstanding job at this point in time.
It is-
lot of information to digest, and there's more work to be done. I'll be attending the Board of Ed first budget work session tomorrow evening, and the subsequent ones as well. So we're just at the beginning stages, and let's see what we can do. So I guess if there are no further questions or comments from anybody participating, Robert and Steve, I think we can close the work session. I want to thank you both for all the work that you put into your presentations. I know that there's a lot more back work you're doing for both of your budgets, but I do appreciate that you put this together tonight for us to have a little bit of an overview of what we can be expecting.
We will be putting this PowerPoint up on the town website probably tomorrow. So
Okay.
we'll put that date as far as the BAA is concerned so that people can get access to it. Kevin, I believe this was on YouTube this evening, so did it get taped?
Yes, it did. Yep.
So we'll be able to put a link up on the webpage as well. So if people want to watch this, if they didn't get a chance to watch it this evening, we'll have it available. So they'll just have to click, and we'll let people know that that's an option as well.
Great.
Okay.
All right. If there are no other questions or comments, I guess we will close this work session, and thank you again for all your help.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.